Okay, hi everyone. Hello again. Mm. So I hope you all had a nice restful tea break, and I hope you took a break online as well. I hope you took a screen break because you've been looking at your screen for a while now. So hopefully we've given you quite a big overview this morning about lots of different types of publishing and how to write papers. And now we're going to go, once you've written your papers, we're going to move into what you can do once you've published a few papers. So just to talk about, we're going to all talk about our careers. So I'm going to talk about mine first. So I got a BSc in zoology from Queen Mary University of London, where my research was focused on stalk-eyed fly aggression, and stalk-eyed flies are the little cute flies down there. They fight over resources, so it was a lot of time in a lab watching flies fighting. And then I went straight on to do an MSc in ecology and evolutionary biology, again at Queen Mary University of London, where I looked at how bats that live in the same area separate the niche and how they can all coexist in the same space. I actually ended up publishing my master's thesis in ecology and evolution, which is Ali's journal. But that was very many years ago now. And I wasn't ready to go into a PhD, but I wanted to stay connected to research and ecology. And then the key skills that I had and wanted to get involved in my career were communication, team building, and creativity as well. So I joined Springer Nature as an assistant editor. and was promoted to journal development editor 2016 to 2019. And that was, again, furthering my creative and science communication skills. And then I've been at the British Ecological Society now since 2020, starting out as an officer and then promoted to manager and then senior manager because of project and budget management skills. And I talk a lot about these skills because just to kind of emphasize how transferable they are. They're skills that probably a lot of people have, but don't necessarily think about publishing as a career. It's not a really well-known career path. I also work on EDI projects and branding projects because I have interest in these areas as well. So I'm just sort of wanted to separate and kind of talk to you about the difference between publishing and editorial. So I have a publishing career, so I don't make any decisions on manuscripts. I do look at papers sometimes, but I generally, it doesn't come into my work a great deal. A lot of my job is around making the journals work really well, working with the editors, doing things like this, doing workshops, doing trainings. So I'm like a publishing person with some knowledge of the area. And then we have people who are experts in the area with some knowledge of publishing, and they're in editorial. So these are the kinds of roles that you might see separated out. And I'm going to hand over to Ali to talk about the editorial side.
Yeah, so there's I think you're right, Rowena, that a lot of people don't realize that publishing is a career option. And I actually am a full-time editor with Wiley. So this is even a little bit different than we have internal editors and then external editors like Errol's position. So I'm a full-time editor with my two journals that I work on. And I do some outreach. This is the part I really enjoy, the outreach and getting to do workshops like this and um, policy and think about how we can grow and develop the journals and how we can make people feel included in these journals. All of these things are parts of my position, but I also do make decisions on papers and handle the review process for quite a few papers as well. But my background is I got a bachelor's of science in botany. I then did a master's in marine science. And after my master's program, I actually went and was an assistant editor for a journal of phycology, which is one of those niche journals, for 5 years. And this was through Wiley. And so I got that experience of being more of an assistant editor in the admin position and working with a society, with a publishing company with Wiley. I then went back and got my PhD in marine science and did a short postdoc. And then with COVID and everything that happened, I decided to try to look into an alternative career other than going straight into academia. And this is when I looked back into working with Wiley. I started out as more of an admin position again with the medical society, and then moved into becoming editor-in-chief for ecology and evolution and journal of biogeography, which has just been the best position because I feel that I get to still be in science and I really love the papers that come through these two journals. So the next slide, let's see here. Oh, that's in and out. Does someone mind moving? I've conducted a lot of research in different areas, California, Chile, Alaska, Texas, Montana, presented a lot of my work at different conferences, taught field courses, and also mentored undergraduate and graduate students. So this is something that I really enjoy doing, these outreach publication workshops, because I have sort of had experience in all of these different facets of publishing. So the next slide, please. And I also have experience publishing with a lot of different journals. So I feel like coming from the author's point of view, I understand as an editor, being an author and being a reviewer and all of those different sides that go into it. And I think it really gives me a more holistic view of the publication process and all of the different, the hardships and the different barriers for each of the steps for each of the positions that are included in the whole publication process. So it's been a very interesting journey into my position. And I want to talk next about, let's see what the next slide is, how there are different roles and how you can become more of a career editor, like what I'm doing, or if you want to get involved in editing or in publishing, there are these certain steps that people sort of need to take to get into those positions and to gain experience in publication. And really, the first and most important step is to become an author and understand that review process yourself. And then once you've become an author, you can move to the next slide. You will be included into the reviewer database and likely be invited to be a reviewer. If you aren't invited, always feel free to email editorial assistants, editors, anyone within a journal to say that you're interested in being a reviewer. And as long as you've published a paper, that's really all you need to become a reviewer. The next step after becoming a reviewer is then maybe you would be asked to be a guest editor in a special issue that would be very specific to your area, your field of expertise. And at that point, another step that might take you more into the senior editor positions is becoming an editorial board member. And this is a little bit more of a hands-off position within journals. You usually will help with reviews if they need, and then also help direct any policy changes or things like that. You're just more of a community member that the higher up senior editors will ask your opinions on things as they're trying to better the journal. Once the next step after that is to become more of a senior editor, and the senior editor roles are either associate editor, where you actually are handling the review process, inviting reviewers, making recommendations, and then senior editor and editor-in-chief you're making those final decisions. And in my position, I still do handle quite a few papers, but not as many. I'm also doing more of the final decisions, and looking at papers that are coming in, and then working on outreach, growth, and just making sure that the journal is running smoothly overall. So that's if you're interested in getting into publishing, that is the pathway to get into publishing. And the next slide, as we're going to share these slides with you, I did want to say that the Wiley has a Wiley Researcher Academy. One of the things that is under in these webinars is a workshop on how to be an effective peer reviewer. And this is just such an important aspect of the publication process. And as we discussed in other parts of the webinar today, or the workshop today, is that it's really important to be a constructive reviewer, and you can be a great reviewer. You can give a lot of feedback, but it's important to be kind and constructive. And that's really how we're all going to benefit and to ensure that the peer review process really works. So if you are asked to review, or you feel like you would like to prepare before you review a paper, this is a great way to just gain some experience. And I've heard of a few people that have taken this reviewer course and really felt like it helped. So thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Errol, I think is next.
All right. Thanks, Ollie. That's great. Just a quick few words from myself. I think you've already heard a bit about what I've been up to in my career, but yeah, looks like we've lost the slides. That's fine. Our tech team are working on it. There we go. Great, thank you. So I did study at University of KwaZulu-Natal. I did my undergrad. I think I finished in about 2001, and then I did an honors degree. I did it part-time over 2 years while I was doing part-time work at the Durban Botanic Gardens. And I started doing some work at that point on cycads. And so that was quite interesting. I did quite a bit of research on storing pollen and other germplasm in what effectively you call sort of cryopreservation, which is in liquid nitrogen, and then trying to see if one could take that plant material out of the liquid nitrogen and get it to grow again, because there was a lot of interest at that time in that idea of seed banks and storing germplasm in liquid nitrogen. So that was quite interesting. So I got to go and look at a lot of cycads and collect pollen and all of that. And then for my master's, it was more of a desktop master's, doing a little bit more sort of data crunching, I suppose you could call, where I was looking at medicinal plants, particularly here from KZN, and going through a lot of the old texts and some of the newer texts, information that had been written about the various muti plants. And I've got a picture here of Warburgia. I'm sure many of you will know it, Isbacha, and some of the compounds that come out of that plant, and looking at, what plant family is that tree in? Is it similar to other plants, and what are the sort of compounds that come out of those plants, and how could they be used medicinally? Because at that time, the South African government was looking at trying to do more research on our local indigenous muti plants. There's a recognition that people in other countries are coming here to collect plants and then doing all the research somewhere else and then selling medicinal drugs that effectively are from compounds out of our own plants. So that was very interesting, and I did manage to publish some of my results in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology. And yeah, I think what's also interesting, maybe just to mention, is while I was doing my honors, I also published a few papers in non-academic journals. I think we heard earlier about a little journal called Plant Life. It's sort of for general little publications. It's quite a niche little journal. It's not really peer reviewed. They do have sort of an editorial team, but it's not a recognized peer review journal. And publications in that, it's an online journal magazine. You can submit something that's 2 or 3 pages. You can submit something that doesn't have to have a list of references. It could be a story, a narrative. And that was quite useful for me at that stage while I was busy with my honors, just starting to get into writing. And it was nice to be able to submit stuff to sort of an easier entry point, and then later getting into one of the other journals. And then subsequent to that, I joined the municipality in 2006 as a specialist ecologist, and then later on senior manager of restoration ecology. I mentioned earlier about UKZN and the offer of becoming an honorary research fellow at that point. And then associate editor with Ecological Solutions and Evidence Journal in 2007. And then recently, and again, it's not a full-time position. It's something I do after hours, is contribute to Ecological Solutions and Evidence as a practitioner editor, just something that I'm passionate about. And helping to try and encourage practitioners to publish, encouraging people to look at this concept of co-design and why it's so important. And hopefully, that's something that, what's quite interesting, I did mention our partnership with the university. So that's why I put that photograph up there. That's just one of the images. We had meetings with a lot of the students and researchers. For one of our sites out at Buffelsdry, there's a reforestation project there, and I think we've had about 30 postgrad students do research projects on that particular project site already. At the time in 2015, we had funding for postgrad students, and I think we managed to fund about 15 postgrad students to do research on that site. So that was quite a big learning curve for me, just engaging in that sort of transdisciplinary research, because we had folk from social sciences, economics, climate change, botany, and various others. So that's quite interesting. But my day-to-day work is still dealing with the ecosystems, from fire control and grasslands through to alien plant control and planting forests and restoring wetlands. So it's nice to be able to dabble a bit across all these different areas of interest. So that's it from me. Thanks very much.
Adam, are you there?
Hi, Rowena. Yeah, I'm here.
So it's panel conversation time.
Excellent.
So if you would we be able to get Adam and Ali up on the screen, please? And we actually don't need the slides for right now. I think maybe if we just have
I think I'm sharing my video, but at the moment I can still see that fantastic picture of an ant. It's a really friendly looking ant.
It's a dragonfly, I think.
Oh, is it dragonfly?
That's why it's so friendly.
Oh yeah, sorry, my bad. Yeah. Odonata. There we go.
We're still getting you up, Adam, and we're going to get Ali up as well. Oh, okay, great. There we go. We've got you. So people online, you should be able to see Ali and Adam, and then can they also see us?
I don't know. We can't see the presentation or the slide. Is there?
I think the slides will be okay. Can you see me?
No.
No.
Is it possible to get there? Okay, cool. So Adam's going to be chairing conversation. So I'll hand over to Adam.
Okay. So in this version of Zoom, I don't have access to the chat. So it's going to be difficult for me to monitor the chat and chair. I think Ollie, you might have the same. Do you have the same issue? Oh, hang on, wait, no, I'm probably no. I can make it work. Actually, my bad.
And I don't mind monitoring it either.
That's right. No, I'm happy to do so. I've now got the chat up, which is great. The other thing I cannot see is the physical audience. So I hope you've all had a really fantastic day, the physical audience and the virtual audience. We are now here as a panel to answer your questions across everything that we've covered today, and also anything that we may not have covered today. So please, no question is a silly question. All questions are welcome. Please, if you're attending virtually, put any question you'd like to have in the chat, and any questions from the floor. If I could just ask either Rowena or Errol to convey that question, or for the microphone to be passed to the individual who's asking the question, that would be very helpful, because I couldn't hear at the sessions earlier today questions from the floor unless they were repeated by the speaker.
No problem.
Other than that, we're good to go. So please don't leave any stone unturned. We are here to help you with driving forward your publishing, your future published articles, and also potentially your involvement in publications. So please go ahead.
Any questions in the room? Yeah.
The question is relating to reviewer 2. So when you send your your paper in, it tends to go to 2 reviewers, and reviewer 1 always seems to give you like helpful, constructive input on your paper, and reviewer 2, wow. What does one do with reviewer 2?
That is the question. Let me just make sure I've got the question right. Is why is reviewer 2 always so grumpy? Is that the question? One thing I would say is that and Ali, I'd love to pass this over to you and your experiences in dealing is that what we try to do through our sort of our, not just our internal sort of policies and practices, but more broadly in line with what the sort of international policies and practices are via the Committee of Publication Ethics and other organizations, is to encourage reviewer comments to be by all means critical, but constructively critical, because the whole point of the peer review process is to ultimately improve the paper and help the author deliver the best possible manuscript for publication. So very much the ethos of peer review should be that of improving the paper, and the way in which that is communicated. We do our best to emphasize the importance of keeping feedback constructive and not overly subjective. So I'm going to pass over to Ali and to Errol for their additional thoughts on this.
Yeah, and so when you're referring to what to do with their remarks, are these mostly remarks that are unnecessarily harsh? Are they vague and not helpful? What is your how would you describe reviewer two's comments?
So I think it's just that sometimes they're very over expectant on what you can deliver in your paper, and they say things like you should have done this and you should have done that, and it's just like impossible. But it's almost a bit of a joke in a sense. Like on Facebook, there's a group called Reviewer 2 must be stopped. So it is a joke. But more seriously, you know, there are those reviewers that are just, the expectations are so high as to what you should have done in your paper. So I think it was addressed earlier in the day, but just a summary would be helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, I think the really big thing is to first of all take a step back and look at that associate editor or the final decision that's made by the editor, because they're going to take in the whole picture, both reviews and their own assessment of the paper. And so if they give you a major revision or a revision decision, and there's still those really harsh comments from that reviewer number 2, I think it's important to do your best. You can acknowledge their comments in a respectful way, but you can, you know, clearly state maybe that's outside of the scope. I mean, I've seen reviewers say that the authors should add another site and season to their paper, and that would help, you know, and it's like, so you want them to go do another experiment, basically, like, you know, a whole nother field season or a whole nother. And so I think it's important to really pay attention to what the associate editor says. You also can contact the associate editor or the editor and say, I'm not quite sure how to address this. I want to do it in a respectful way, or I want to make sure that I'm incorporating those comments the best I can, but I'm not sure how to incorporate it because of the way that they stated it. And I get those kinds of comments back quite a bit from people. And then I can kind of help say, well, really just take what you can out of there that's constructive to apply to your paper. The other comments, you maybe don't want to completely brush over them, but you could say something like, that's something I will think about that next time for my next project or in the future, or things like that. So that's how I would address it, and just do the best you can to actually use the comments that are useful. And another thing that's important is it's really hard when you first read those reviews to take a deep breath, take a step back, and then go back to the review and read it. And if they say, you know, that this wasn't an important study, maybe think, how can I make it more clear to the readers that this was an important study, that sort of thing. So take a step back to do what you can to incorporate what they say, but don't let it deter you from, you know, completing your revisions and getting that paper published.
The key thing is the you know the bigger picture piece that the associate editors brings to the table, and it you know, more often than not, I'm sure Rowena can talk to this too, that does temper things to a degree. And if, as Ali said, if you're not sure, you can always contact the associate editor directly.
Yes.
Rowena, do you want to add anything?
So I was just going to add a couple of points. I think Ali has given quite a good answer. I'm not sure that I'll be able to add much to that, but for me, it is just to maybe take those points that associate editors highlighted, and if necessary, you then bring those points into the paper of, you know, we recognize as authors, or I recognize as an author, that the study did not do this, or it did not do that, or the circumstances did not allow us to do that additional study. We were not able to, and again, future research can also come into your conclusion. We recognize that, there was this or that, and we recommend, or, future research could look into X, Y, and Z, which may be the sort of things that editor has, that associate editor has picked up. So that would be my approach. But I agree, Arlie. I'm not sure how we get people not to take these things too seriously. I think as humans, we feel very picked upon when we get
we're so invested.
Yeah. So
yeah.
But I think that's part of it, and I'm not sure how we get around that. Thanks.
I do think the culture of these, I think I'm seeing more and more in journals, and as I talk to editors and more associate editors, and the culture is changing from these unnecessarily harsh reviews to be more constructive. And it's amazing that you can get a rejection letter that makes you feel better about your work than a major revision letter. And it just has to do with how people word things and how they can help you improve your work. And so I think that's starting to become more and more of something that people are talking about. And that's where you as reviewers, you can start that process by really giving constructive, good reviews.
We have had a question come in from the chat, and it is a really great question. So thank you so much for sending it through, Anisha. So the question is, I sometimes get requests to review papers from journals I don't know of, but when I Google it, sometimes seems to be a real journal. But how do we know when a request is real or a scam email? And I would go a little bit further to say, how do I know if it's a reputable journal or potentially a journal that is not necessarily going to uphold the rigorous standards for peer review? So I've got a few points on that, but before I bring those points forward, Rowena, would you like to comment on this question?
So my first thought would be to have a look at the journal. So maybe you Google it and they have a website. But I would have a look at where they are listed. Maybe this is what you were going to say, Adam, are they a journal that's listed on Scopus? Are they listed on Scholar One? There's a lot of other listings, but I would look for Scopus and I would look for Scholar One. And I would also have a look at their editorial board and their editorial processes as well to see if they're reputable, because predatory journals are a thing, they exist. And to anyone who hasn't heard the term predatory journal before, it's when publishers, maybe Adam, you can summarize this a bit better than I can.
Yeah.
It's around making money rather than making good science. That's how I would.
That's right. That's right. So what we've seen with predatory journals, in particular, and indeed they're just coming through in the chat, that they can be actually quite clever and quite sneaky. Is that if an offer is too good to too good to say no to, sometimes that's a bit of a concern, right? And what we do see is that quite often the journals that end up being predatory journals are promising fast turnaround times and acceptances, which aren't, the peer review process exists for a reason. And even author-friendly journals that are sound science journals, these do still have a rejection rate if the paper is not, of a high enough standard to publish, because there are major flaws in the science. It's not going to progress until it's rewritten and resubmitted as in the shape it needs to be in. A couple of things to note. So just to reiterate what was said before, key things are: is it listed in reputed abstracting and indexing services? So the ones we're looking for primarily are Clarivate Web of Knowledge, or just Web of Knowledge, Scopus, and for open access publications, the Directory of Open Access Journals, or DOAJ, DOAJ. They are the first things that you should be looking for. Second thing is just to make sure that the aims and scope and again the editorial board composition looks correct and looks like it's it is bona fide. And then the third thing is if it's promising you like a submission to acceptance in 20 days or online publication, submission to online publication in 20 days, that's another thing that suggests that it is not potentially upholding the standards of rigorous peer review. The other thing to do is, especially if you're not necessarily a senior research scientist that knows the field and knows the journals in the field, is to ask colleagues, have you ever heard of this journal? Is this a genuine journal? The other thing we have seen before is passing off, and this is slightly harder to know necessarily, but we have had in the past, in more recent times, Journal of Ecology was being essentially cloned at one stage by a predatory publishing entity. So there are sometimes really bad actors out there who are acting well, all bad actors are bad actors, but who are actually trying to mimic or clone a journal that exists. And that is really dangerous and not so easy to necessarily know is happening. But that tends to come from direct solicitation, from someone coming out and reaching out to you and asking you to submit your paper. So again, just checking if that is happening to you, who the journal is that person listed on the editorial board of that journal? Is that person reputable? And are we confident that this isn't something that is basically out there to catch us? And the other thing to bear in mind as well is publication charges. Quite a lot of these journals are trying to get you to part with money. So if the APC is $100 or $150, it's unlikely to be a reputed journal, because most article publishing charges for reputed journals are going to be $1,000 plus. So also bear in mind that if it's offering you very, very cheap publication fees, it's probably not actually a reputed peer review journal. And
also just to touch back on, if you're getting asked to review for a journal like this, that I think that if the review is really within your area of expertise, I think as long as you have the time and the capacity, I think it's always good to do the best review you can. And I can't really think of a reason why that would be a scam, that they would contact you to ask you for a review, and especially if the paper fit within your expertise. But you may want to maybe wait and then review for more of a journal that is of good quality. But as long as they're not asking you to compromise your thoughts on the paper or your comments, I think that should be fine. I just wanted to comment on asking if you're a reviewer, but you can always politely decline if you're unsure. I think that's a good way to go about it.
We've got another question from the floor.
Thanks. Firstly, my appreciation for the engagement. They've been thought-provoking and enlightening. My question is to you guys, and to what extent have you thought of the impact of, let's say, technological advancement? Case in point, let me make an example. We used to rely on traditional newspapers, etc. Now it's all on the phone. It's all online. So those habits have changed. And what if Elon or Musk or Bill Gates tomorrow decide, okay, I'm interested in ecology, or that was my passion, I'm gonna create my own board and journal, like 5 top, money is no issue. Then say everything is free, you can publish, and I put it a bit on my Grok system or be it on my X or Twitter, whatever platform it is. So I'm just thinking, I was just trying to see you guys, to what extent are you thinking along those lines, or you're like, no, you feel it's not an issue, it's not a risk?
I think Adam.
Okay,
so answer that one. What do you think, Adam?
So I think I just want to make sure I can frame this in the right way, because that's a very, very broad question. If we can go into quite a few different directions. I would say, so the first part of the question really is, to what extent are we thinking about the future technology and technology oligarchs potentially involving themselves more and more in research dissemination to the extent that it may affect journals publications as we know them. Another part of that really is also thinking about like the future of how technology can support the research ecosystem, the publications ecosystem. So I suppose I just want to make sure that I answer the gentleman's question well. The first one is, I think we have seen over the years multiple changes to the way in which research is disseminated up to this point. And in fact, research journals now, compared to what they were 15, 16 years ago, are completely different beasts to what they were. So we have already seen technology enable research journals dissemination in a way that is completely different to 20 years ago. I remember my first role in a publishing company was to essentially scan PDFs of hard copy marked up content from editors and email it to the typesetters in India to then change into the corrections on the manuscripts to then send back to us and upload as PDFs online. Obviously, that was web sort of 2.0, and it was barely discoverable at that stage either. But that was still a more digital world than it had been 5 years previously to that. So in terms of technology, technology is an enabler and a risk. It always has been, and it will always continue to be. But I think what publishers and publishing houses and just the published research ecosystem does really well is it benefits itself from the advancements of technology, which is what I hope all scientists will always strive to do. And now, research is so much more discoverable, which is absolutely fantastic. The way to share information is so much more, it's easy. We can do it on our phones. We can do it through various different social media platforms. There's lots of different ways of doing it. I'll pause there for a second because I could spend hours talking about this. The short version is there's always going to be risks. There is always for example, right now we've got in the US, we've got one of the leading White House officials telling us that that if we don't do something about this, then they're just going to start launching their own titles and things like that. But there's so much that goes into research publishing journals to create an effective journal. It isn't as straightforward as some people might think. Rowena or Ali or Errol?
I can.
Sorry, go ahead, Rowena.
No,
go
you
ahead.
you go.
Okay, I was just going to say the same. I've seen things change so much with open access and just with the way that when I was even 13 years ago, when I was working for the Journal of Phycology, a big part of my job was to make sure that we were curating an issue in a right, making sure that the flow of the manuscripts made sense, that we were having the physio. And now that these issues, that it's not even important because people tend to search for one paper based on how people search and how people access these articles now. But I think it's just a continuing thing. And I know that one of the things I really appreciate about working with Wiley, I'm actually on a DEI committee and an ethics committee that we have these working groups that actually discuss a lot of this stuff ahead, try to get ahead of it. I mean, we're, there's always going to be the ones that are ahead, but I think publishing in general does a really good job of responding and reacting to these changes and figuring out, well, how can we use this, as Adam said, in a positive way, but then also how can we mitigate any kind of, ethics issues that might come in. I think that's probably the biggest concern always is how do we harness this for the good, but also make sure that ethically we're still producing the best science that we can and getting the best science out there.
I was just going to echo that and say that Wiley, and I'm sure a lot of organizations do a lot of work around AI and how AI can be a potential solution to a lot of problems, but also how it's that thing of balancing risks. So I think that AI will be a really big helpful tool that really will revolutionize publishing, but only if done really carefully. And so that's why it's good to work with a big publisher like Wiley that has the resources and the knowledge to put into all of these developments.
Yeah, so a really good case study of that would be, yeah, right now we're sort of very much looking at how we can use AI to assist authors in delivering parts of the paper. So whilst it's still important to note that an AI cannot be an author of a paper, we do recognize that in particular for those researchers who don't have English as their first language, having to publish in English is not the most straightforward thing to do, and they should be able to be supported in that process to a degree or to an extent that is fair. So that in itself, is something that we have to put a lot of thought into, and how we develop it and how we sort of detect what is acceptable use of AI versus unacceptable use of AI. But this is the space that we're working in. It's like how do we make the researcher's journey as straightforward as possible, but within the correct ethical frameworks and in a way that supports them and is fair to the scientific record at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Jacqueline has come up with a very good point here about being concerned about the dilution of science and of it being distorted. I want to make sure that I'm on the right lines with this question, so I'm quickly going to ask back to Jacqueline if she's able to comment. In terms of the dilution of the science and of it being distorted, are we talking about the kind of just the background noise of content that isn't validated in the scientific space, or are we going somewhere else with this? Are you able to unmute, Jacqueline?
Jacqueline's responded in the chat.
Oh, fab. Thank you so much. Yes. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Brilliant. So I think that's a great question, and I'm gonna hand this one over to Errol as an editor of ecological solutions and evidence, and having been involved in other editorial positions and with restoration ecology. What's your 10 cents on this, Errol? And would you, what do you think we can do about it?
Thanks, and thanks for the question. So, yeah, also my understanding of, if we're talking about the dilution of science, there is a lot of noise out there. We know that there's a lot of misinformation on various, particularly social media channels, etc. But I think for us, with peer-reviewed papers in reputable journals, those will still continue to lead in terms of being the trusted sources of knowledge for scientists and for policymakers and others. As much as the newspapers and others might jump on and happily promote what we might call fake news or other untruths, I think that's always happened. I think ever since people have been writing and communicating, there have been spaces for misinformation and spreading of incorrect knowledge, call it what you may, propaganda. These things have existed way back in time, and they will continue to be there. And I think for us who are working in the space of trying to ensure that correct standards are maintained and managed as part of reputable science, I think we will continue to find ways to ensure that that is delivered and is available. And I mean, again, and maybe Adam, well, in fact, I think Ali did touch on it earlier this morning, is, this thing of people being able to publish science and having science being more available. We saw that example in Germany where publishers, researchers are able to publish, and I don't think there's any sort of fees, and it's getting published, but there's still a peer review process, and people are able to, and with the advent of sort of open access journals, information becoming more available, I think all of that is contributing to ensuring that that good science is out there. I hope that answers the question, or at least from my perspective. Thanks.
Thanks, Errol. And I would add to that point that the importance of trust is key, right? And one of those great ways to ensure trust is if you check the publication source. That should be something that can help underpin you as the individual, your trust in that particular piece of research or news. One of the things that I think, and I don't want to sort of tread on Rowena's toes in this respect, but one of the things that I always think about when I think about the British Ecological Society in particular is that I believe if I go and read an article from a BES publication, that article is going to stand up. And I think that that's a really important part of this is like, if you trust that source, then it's a mark of quality, it's a mark of rigorous standards and standards that have been upheld. And that's across all BES publications and ecology and evolution. Ali, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think from, on the ground as people citing work and authors and the work that you put out there to just make sure that you're upholding those ethical standards as well, and not perpetuating, not citing work that isn't quite reputable, just like Adam was saying, to just double check on that sort of thing, because you don't want to keep putting work out there that maybe hasn't been through the right kind of peer review. But I guess I just have a lot of faith in the peer review process and the way that it works. And of course, things get through sometimes, but usually those sorts of papers, either corrections or letters to the editor, there's usually a lot of discussion around it. And if it increases discussion around something, that's good too. That's really that's the whole point of publishing, is to, increase awareness, start discussions, spark interest, ask more questions. That's really what we're doing here. So,
yeah. Rowena, would you like to add anything?
I don't. I just wanted to flag, I'm mindful of time. I think we might be out of time. I don't know if there are any more questions.
There was one more that came in. Ramadan Shorke has asked, how can scientific research be better integrated into nature conservation policies to ensure the long-term protection of fragile ecosystems facing the climate change? A really good question. And Rowena, I know that the British Ecological Society does a lot in this space, so would you be able to comment a little bit on what the BES is doing in this space to better connect the two?
Sure. So I actually published a paper on this just last year, looking at pathways to achieving real world impact with research. We looked at a lot of different things. We surveyed our authors for the last 5 years. And then we also looked, we gave them like a free text of like, what if we could offer you anything to achieve real world impact, what would that be? The answers that came out were things we've talked about today. Co-design, that's really important. If you get people involved at the point where you're designing the study, then that is going to have real world impact. That's the number one thing. That also of them all is the most difficult thing though, I think. So also from once you've got your paper, even if it's not co-designed, you can think about where you disseminate it. So where you go and talk about it. So we actually host free online webinars that have a policy and practitioner audience. So we use our platform that Errol was talking about, AER, and we do AER lives. And we have a big long list of people that we send those out to, and these are practitioners and policymakers. But the other thing is plain language summaries that we mentioned earlier, getting your paper written out in plain language that is applicable for the people who you want it to impact. And I think there was one more conclusion that came out of the paper, and I can't remember. There were 4 pathways. There was one more. You'll have to go read the paper.
You'll remember it in a minute, just as you're closing. No doubt that will just pop up there right then. If not, the paper is available. We should signpost to it.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned AER and ecological solutions and evidence and the work that's been going on in there, and also in terms of interdisciplinary research that's been taking place. So obviously with the launch of People in Nature 5 or 6 years ago as well, a lot of this has been sort of gearing up towards just better connection with policy and decision makers as well. Yeah, really, really fascinating research. So yeah, so more to be done, but good strides.
Yeah. So we have one more activity for people, and it's just some feedback. So if we would be able to switch back over to my slides, the one with the grasshopper, dragonfly. So you can scan the QR code or you can click on the link. It'll only work for up to 50 participants. So if it doesn't let you do it, we can share the actual slides themselves. If you give me one moment, there's just a couple of questions just to get your thoughts on the day.
Are we able to see the word cloud?
We're getting them now. So the first question is, I can't remember it off the top of my head. It'll be up in 1 second.
Okay.
What did you find most useful from today? That's question number 1. What did you find most useful about today? Also, while we're talking about this dragonfly, this is from a thing called the Animal Comedy Awards. So it's comedic animal photos. I highly recommend having a look at their website. Great. So reviewers input, Wiley Publishing, co-design, OCR structure. I love the OCR structure. So useful. Review process, publishing process. Great. Funding options. Yes, we will summarize those as well in the follow-up email. Can we switch over to the next slide? So, oh, sorry. You should just be able to click. Yeah. And then the next question, to what extent do you agree with the following? So if I submit a paper to a reputed society or Wiley journal, it will be assessed fairly. And I have a good understanding of my options for paying for publishing. It's one of those scales, strongly agree to strongly disagree. And if there are any comments in the chat or any questions in the chat?
We have what publishers look for is very useful from Anisha.
So I wanted to ask this question a little earlier. It might be a bit contentious, but that's my role. In Africa, we really want to work hard at getting our science onto the global platform. I've just been sitting on an international panel review of European big consortia, and I was horrified at the lack of referencing to excellent science done from Africa. But we do have a problem in that our scientists are split very thin. And I'm sure when you're looking for reviewers, you don't, if we want our science to be represented, we need to be represented in the reviewer side as well. But do you have any strategies to make sure that science from countries and areas which don't have the resources and their scientists are spread very thin to still try and ensure that their work is included and given due diligence? Because there seems to be this perception that if it's from the global south, we don't need to bother. Yeah, it was horrific to see. And I mean, fire ecology, there were proposals on fire ecology, not one reference from the African continent. It was shocking.
Thank you. I think Adam, do you want to talk a little bit to that, and then I can add to
this
it?
is a really, really poignant question, and one that isn't surprising me to hear. I think we've been trying really hard in sort of certainly so prior to the most recent restructure within Wiley, we had what we would call field specific teams. So up until 2 or 3 years ago, the only area that I worked in was ecology, plant science, zoology, and evolutionary biology. So our field essentially. And so this was something that was, we spent a lot of time looking at, was the breakdown of the reviewers, where the reviewer pool was. The vast majority of the reviewers that we were finding for manuscripts and papers lived in North America, in Europe, and then occasionally somewhere else, maybe in Australia, New Zealand. Sometimes we'd find some reviewers that would be based in Brazil, and sometimes we'd find some reviewers that would be in China. But the peer review burden on the whole fell North America and Europe, and that in itself isn't particularly equitable, and also, runs the risk of having potential unconscious biases involved with it, right? So we've been trying really hard to find networks and people who can review and become associate editors and be involved in this process from underrepresented regions and areas, such as we're seeing here. So these opportunities to network, these opportunities to find potential reviewers and associate editors, just like what was mentioned by Urs this morning, is critical. It's so important to ensure that we've got the right representation so that the science can be assessed fairly. And there isn't a magic wand to do that other than continuing to work together to build networks and connect people. And the more and more we can connect with research journals and people together, we can build a more equitable and fair and balanced reviewer and associate editor pool for journals to ensure that that representation is there and that science is ultimately published from these regions and groups. So yeah, that's not the perfect answer, but hopefully, these efforts and these ways to connect with each other is going to help us in delivering that.
I just wanted to add to that one of the projects that I've been working on with the DEI Council is actually creating modules for editors to educate them on these biases that they may not even be aware of how biased they are in their idea of where science is coming from, and the reviewers and exactly what you were saying, just not being fully aware that they have these biases. And so creating, being able to educate editors and then make sure that we're creating that culture of inclusion within our external and internal editor pools is something that's very is talked about a lot, I would say, within our group at Wiley and within a lot of the other societies that we work with at Wiley as well.
Rowena, do you want to talk about the Open Editor, AE Editor initiative that the BES undertakes on a routine basis?
Yeah, so every 3 years we hire new associate editors. That will be happening at the end of this year. We'll have an open call. It will open in December and it will close in the new year. It'll be open for a few months. This is actually quite unusual in the journal space. A lot of the time you'll be invited to join a journal as an editor, which means that you need to be known to that editor. We trialed this a few years ago where we did an open call and we found that we got a load more diversity in our applicants. It's interesting because it's really good at diversifying where people are from, but it's not very good at diversifying gender. So we actually found if we did active recruitment, seeking people out is how we would find more women to join the board. But we found that we got people from a more diverse region if we had an open call. So we now do open calls and we try and put in the wording that we're really keen to hear from women when we have these open calls, women and minority genders. So yeah, we've got that opening at the end of this year. So I do encourage anyone who would be interested to apply. And I do think that this is, like Adam said, it's all about creating networks, because if people don't know, I think there's also a little bit of education, because so I recently published a paper a few years ago on language and the language bias that exists. We were talking about meta-analyses earlier, and if people are conducting meta-analyses, and let's say it's a researcher in the UK doing a meta-analysis and they're just searching in English for their words in English, they're just going to come across Anglocentric viewpoints. But so we talked about the importance of searching in other languages as well, especially languages if you're looking at a study system and it might be in South Africa, South America. What languages are the local languages there, and who are the experts, and what languages are they publishing in? And if you can combine those two things together, so you're searching in English and local languages, you find that you get quite big differences in what papers you pull out. I think that's an education issue, that people need to be doing that more, and that's why we publish that paper. But I also think that the networks is so important, because if we don't know where people are, we can't be connecting. And so making sure that you're connecting through, that's why things like the society are really important, because it's a global society and you can go into a special interest group. You can be based on the other side of the world, but you can go into a special interest group in fire ecology, and you can be called upon when somebody needs a fire ecology expert. So I think networks, but I also think there's some education still to be done there.
Mm-hmm.
I realize we have one more question on the Mentimeter, one final question, which is, what can we be doing more of? What can the BES and what can Wiley be doing more of? And this is another word cloud. So you can fill this in. I realize we've gone over it a little bit, so you can fill this in. If you missed it, then you can just type in the Zoom chat. But as a society, we run by the community. So the reason that we offer things is because the community asks us to offer things. The reason we do open calls is because the community said, why don't you do an open call? That's how everything kind of starts at the BES, is someone will say, why don't you try doing this and see if that has an impact? So anything you put in here will be considered, and it will just help, hopefully, us serve the community better. So thanks, everyone. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you for sticking with us in the long day. Ali, the sun is setting here now, so it's probably like midday there, or not even yet. So thanks so much to our fellow panel members, especially to Ali joining so early in the morning. Thank you to our tech team. Thank you to everyone looking after the Zoom today. Any questions? There is actually one final slide. I'm so sorry, there's one final slide. It's just got my email address. So it's on the PowerPoint. If anybody wants to get in touch with any of us from today, there are some email addresses at the end. If you email either myself or Ali, we can direct you to Errol or Adam or anyone at the BES or Wiley. So feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to hear from you. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Everybody.
All right, I think I'm going to sign off, Adam.
Likewise. Ali, thank you again for everything and for getting up at a crazy hour this morning. It's hugely appreciated. Thank you so much.
This was really fun to be a part of, so thank you. Yeah.
Awesome. We'll have a debrief at some stage, but have a great day. Bye.
Yeah, take care.